Yeah.
Service is dead and it won't charge.
Okay, so 1, make sure you put in a call to tech service thing. And 2, I have a surface in the back there. If you want to grab that, I'll unlock it for you and you can use it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go over the fall of the House of Usher. Oh, she lost my place. Why did she do that? So remember the very beginning of the story, that is going to be where we have the exposition, okay? It is purposeful that this particular story, hello? Hello? So it should let you log in. And remember, when you log in, you have to do that FCS SDU /.
Yep.
And then your name. Okay, so it's purposeful that the house and the setting and all of those things are associated with death, right? Because ultimately, Edgar Allan Poe is making a commentary on the sort of existential crisis of life. A big aspect of this particular story is the fact that Edgar Allan Poe is a dark romantic. All right, when we talk about the idea of the dark romantics believed that society was the danger. Society is the bad thing. All right, so get away from society and go out into, and for the romantics, it was go out into nature. For the dark romantics, go out into the darkness, go out into the dark aspects of nature. So with Edgar Allan Poe, we have this house that is very secluded from everything else and everything in society. And Edgar Allan Poe, like a good romantic, doesn't just say it's good to be away from everyone else. It says it's good to be away from everyone else, but watch out for this or that thing. Because the problem with the House of Usher is not just that they're secluded, it's that they are so involved with themselves that they don't have an awareness of the outside world. And that is kind of what a swamp is. A swamp is basically eating itself alive. Think about the biome of a swamp. All of the little animals that live there are living off of the construct of decay. The reason they have all of the algae that they can eat is that the algae is growing off of the decaying plant matter at the bottom of the swamp. The reason the swamp itself exists and the stagnant water exists is ultimately because it is not moving. It has stayed still. It does not move forward and it does not move backward, just like the House of Usher. The House of Usher does not progress. And in fact, we see the actual crumble and the end of the House of Usher at the end of this story. So all of those aspects of setting, and remember the very beginning of the story, where it's all complicated language, the very beginning of the story is setting us up to understand that this is a place of isolation, just like a good haunted house. Good haunted house can't be in the middle of the city, right? A good haunted house has to be in the woods, away from everyone else. So when you're looking at these elements, I don't want you to just be like, oh, well, that's a symbol. The house is a symbol. Yes, it's a symbol, but it's got multiple layers, right? It's like Shrek. It's like an onion. It's got layers, all right? So when we're talking about the exposition of the story, it's not just giving you the background information of our narrator, it's also giving you the background information that is symbolic to everyone else, okay? Rising action. When he enters the house and starts to have some realizations about the house itself, look at your literary term sheet. There are 3 points of view. There's first person point of view, and there's third person limited and third person omniscient. Third person omniscient is that we don't hear the narrator of the story say I. The person who is telling the story is not a participant in the story. The person who is telling the story can see into the brains of everyone. Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, you should probably write this down. You should probably write this down. Shirley Jackson's The Lottery is third person omniscient. That is purposeful. We can see into the brains of all of the characters. Well, why is that purposeful? Because we need to know their motivations. If Shirley Jackson's theme is that there is a commentary about sacrificing one person for the good of many and how that's kind of messed up, then we have to know that the motivations of these people aren't evil. It's not like they got up that morning and were like, hey, let's go kill someone. Ta-da! Instead, they participate in this ritual year after year after year without question. They do it every single year because that's just what you do. There is no new thing that is on the horizon. Even the box itself, which is like falling apart. The box itself, which is falling apart, is a symbol for the fact that we have traditions that we don't question. You don't have to agree with the argument. I don't want you to agree with every argument that you're presented. But you have to recognize it so that you know when someone's arguing for you or to you, okay? So Shirley Jackson's The Lottery is making a commentary on the justice system in the United States. We are aware of the fact that in the United States, we have the best justice system in the world, however, comma, we occasionally accidentally kill someone who we found out later was innocent. And that is something that we accept because we have to. Shirley Jackson's short story is saying, yes, we do that. And we do it because we've always done it. And that's messed up. That is the theme of the story. Sacrificing one person for the good of many is an allegory for this criminal justice system. You should probably write that down. Shirley Jackson's The Lottery uses third-person omniscient to prove the point that the motivations of the people in this society aren't evil. They don't take delight in killing folks. They just do it because that's the way it's always been done. It is something that they accept. Contrarily, on the other hand, contrastly, and opposite to, the fall of the House of Usher is in, you should probably write this down, first person. First person. Why is that important to the theme? If we're talking about a family that is so isolated that all they do is think about themselves, and that thought process of just about themselves ultimately means that it is their own demise, then isn't it appropriate that the person who is telling the story is only telling it from their point of view? Could our narrator be wrong about all of this? Absolutely. He's constantly questioning himself throughout the short story. He's like, listen, I looked down and I was like, hey, that's a creepy house. I don't know. I'm in the middle of the woods. Maybe it's not that creepy. Maybe it's just me. I think I'm going to take my horse to the top of this hill and I'm going to look at this particular piece of swamp and I'm going to look at the swamp reflection and not the house and maybe I won't get creeped out. Oh no, I'm more creeped out. So the fact that he's constantly questioning is his own internal battle that he's having, which is also symbolic of the fact that the House of Usher is all internal. That's one of the dangers of the Romantics. The Romantics said society is not helpful. You don't even know yourself. All you know is what society tells you you know. So get away from society. The Dark Romantics go, yeah, get away from society, but be careful. Because if you're into yourself a little bit too much, this is what happens. Look what happens. All right, your family falls apart. You're constantly questioning everything. You don't know who you are. You don't know what reality is. Okay? So when we talk about the fall of the House of Usher, you should probably write this down. The fact that it's first-person narration helps us understand the theme because ultimately it's about questioning being too far away from other people. The story of the monkeys. The story of the monkeys that we saw, the animated version. Could we see into the minds of any of those monkeys? Could we hear their thoughts? No. We could infer. We could see what their facial expressions were. We could see their actions. We could see the way that they interacted with other monkeys. So we could infer what they were thinking, but could we actually see into their thought process? No. So the point of view of the monkey story, that one, you should probably write this down, is third person limited. Third person limited. We are limited to one point of view. In this case, we're limited so much so that we can't see into anyone's brain. So remember, 3 different points of view. First person, follow the House of Usher. I'm telling the story. I am not a reliable narrator. Think of other stories that you've read that are first-person narration. Catcher in the Rye is a great example of first-person narration and an unreliable narrator. Holden is a whiny baby. That's why no one likes him. And you can't rely on him. And you don't realize it until the very end of the book when you're like, wait, so this entire book is based off the fact that he got his song lyric wrong? Yar. Okay, first-person narration. Third-person narration. Third-person narration is split into omniscient, thank God, omniscient, all-seeing, all-knowing, limited. Omniscient, I can see into everyone's brain. Shirley Jackson's The Lottery. Why? Because we need to know their motivations. We need to know that this isn't just a village of psychopaths, which would be a great Stephen King short story, but that's not what we're reading. Okay? Third-person omniscient means that I can see into everyone's brain. I can see all of their motivations. Third-person limited, I can only see into one person's brain. The Devil and Tom Walker. That's another example of third-person limited. The Devil and Tom Walker. Whose motivations do we see? Tom Walker's. That's it. Why? Because he's the one that we're supposed to identify with. If the Devil and Tom Walker's theme, which it is, you should probably write this down. If the Devil and Tom Walker's theme is ultimately money is not going to save your soul, then we need to know who your soul is. Because you're supposed to identify with Tom Walker. Is he an anti-hero? Absolutely. Is he kind of a jerk? Absolutely. Do you still sometimes identify with some of his motivations? A little bit. Okay? So it's supposed to be a warning. Remember, I told you guys at the beginning of this unit, American authors love an allegory, and every single one of these is an allegory. If you go back and look at those formatives, the formatives are supposed to make you focus on a particular aspect of the short stories that you will see again. For example, The Mask of the Red Death asks you to focus on metaphor. Chances are, depending on the version of the test you get, that you're going to get questions on the test that have to do with the Mask of the Red Death and metaphor. Do I want you to know that the red room is supposed to represent passion and frenzy? No. Do I want you to know that the guy that is dressed up like the Red Death is supposed to represent plague and also death? Yes. You should probably write that down. In The Mask of the Red Death, the guy who is dressed up in a costume like death is supposed to represent death and also the plague. So too, the fact that the main character, the guy, Prince Prospero, his last name means money. So that means he's supposed to represent a wealthy mindset. AKA, even if you're rich, you're gonna die. Whether it's from this plague or just in general. You can't save yourself from it. You can't have all of your rich friends protect you from it. You can't exclude death. Death is going to happen. You can't kill death. That's a metaphor. So you're going to see that kind of thing again. Remember at the very beginning of this unit, we talked about the short film that I showed you alike, and it was like Big Blue and Little Orange, right? So Big Blue is a metaphor for the overworked parent. Most likely your parent, especially right now. The overworked parent who's simply trying to provide the pathway to success that they see for their kid. Big Blue is a metaphor. Little Orange is also a metaphor. Little Orange is a metaphor for childhood, innocence, creativity, and you. 3 points of view. First person point of view, third person limited, third person omniscient. You tell me, the short story alike, Big Blue and Little Orange, what point of view is it? First person, third limited, not omniscient because we can't see into their brains, right? So what has got to be?
Limited.
It's got to be limited. The only time that you're going to see a film with omniscient point of view is going to be when someone looks directly at the camera and breaks the third wall. When someone looks at if they're going through like whatever it is, right? They're doing a thing and they look at the audience and they'd be like, this is actually how I felt. I said this, but what I meant was this. Does that make sense? Okay, so when we talk about film, almost invariably, just by the nature of the thing, it's third person limited. One point of view.
Well, if it's omniscient, it's like you have to say it, like say.
Yeah, so it can't be, that's a really good question. So she asked if it's omniscient, they have to vocalize it. So the answer to that question is yes, we have to hear their voice. So what we will hear for third person omniscient is a narrator that comes in and says, you know, she didn't actually think this way, right? Let's say, for example, you're presented a scenario, a woman walks up to a barista and says, I would like a coffee, and the barista says, we only have decaf, and the woman says, I will take decaf. And then a narrator comes on and says, she was very unhappy with this decision. Does that make sense? So we see into the brain of the person who's participating in the story. Okay, good question. Okay, go ahead, how do I study for this test? Here's what you do. I'm giving you a list. You should probably write this down. Step 1. You have not done the formatives and you are absolutely convinced that you do not want to do the formatives, at least do this. Go back and look at the assignment description. The assignment description is a clue as to what I'm going to ask you on the test. There are 4 versions of the test. There are 4 formatives. So depending on which version you get, you should know all 4. It's a Russian roulette. Okay? Some of it's going to focus on characterization. Some of it's going to focus on symbolism. Some of it's going to focus on metaphor. Some of it's going to focus on like setting and plot and all that stuff. I'm not going to tell you which one because you have to be prepared for all of them. All right? So at least do that. Use that literary terms chart and know the definitions. Just a basic definition. It would help you, it would behoove you, or be in your best interest, it would help you if you memorized this definition. Listen to me very carefully. Theme is the message the author is trying to convey about the human condition. I'm going to say it again. I just want you to listen, but in a minute, you guys say it back to me. My at-home people, I want you to turn your microphones on, and I'm going to make you say it with me. Listen first, and then I'm going to make you say it with me. So listen first. There's a rhythm to it. Theme is the message the author is trying to convey about the human condition. You ready? Here we go. Say it after me. Theme is the message the author is trying to convey about the human condition. Theme is the message the author is trying to convey about the human condition. Theme is the message the author is trying to convey about the human condition. Memorize it. Know it. Breathe it. Live it. Love it. You will see it. Again, I promise you, I don't know how to make this more clear. Memorize the definition. Okay? Follow the House of Usher. Find the part of the story all right. So in the short story, there should be a section where we have this long poem. All right, so right before the long poem, it says the verses, which were entitled The Haunted Palace, ran very nearly, if not accurately, thus. Okay, find that section. Find that section. And it says, 1, in the greenest of our valleys by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately place, radiant palace reared its head. Did you guys see it? Find that section. All right, you with me? All right, underneath that, it says, I well remember the suggestions arising from this ballad led us into a train of thought wherein there became a manifest an opinion of Usher's, which I mentioned not so much on account of its novelty, for other men have thought thus, as on account of the pertinacity with which he maintained it. This opinion in its general form was that of the sentience of all vegetable things. Wait. Our narrator, who we already know doesn't really believe in himself, our narrator has just said that Usher believes in the sentience. The sentience. If something is sentient, what does that mean? Look it up. Google it. Find a definition for me. Tell me what it means. What is sentient? At home people, Google sentient. Tell me what it means. S-E-N-T-I-N-T. Sentient. Okay, to perceive or feel things. If something is sentient, it means it has a soul. It can think for itself. Roderick Usher believes that vegetable things can think and feel, aka vegetables have a soul. Okay? That means that our narrator is beginning to understand that Roderick Usher has gone a little woo-hoo. That's one of the dangers of being away from society. I told you guys, romantics believe that society is the danger. Society is the bad guy. So get away from society. But what happens if you're by yourself, living in a house that's falling into a swamp and there's no one to talk to you but your crazy sister? You might go a little crazy. Okay? So that's essentially what our author is telling us, our narrator is telling us. The belief, however, was connected, as I had previously hinted, with the gravestones of the home of his forefathers. Wait. What? Roderick Usher believes not only that vegetable matter, aka the moss that's growing on the outside of the house, has a thought process, he also believes that the house itself has a thought process. The conditions of the sentience had been there, he imagined, fulfilled, and the method of collocation of which these stones, in order of their arrangement, as well as that of the many fungi which overspread them, and the decayed trees which stood around, above all, in the long, undisturbed endurance of this arrangement, and its reduplication in the still waters of the tarn. Remember, tarn is a swamp. Man, what is he saying? This is what he's saying. My friend Roderick Usher has gone a little woohoo, and he is explaining to me, after we drank a little too much, okay, he is explaining to me that the house is alive, the moss is alive. The reason it's alive is that there is a swamp in front of the house, and the swamp is giving life to the house. Okay? The evidence of the sentience was to be seen, he said, and here I started as he spoke, in the gradual yet uncertain condensation of the atmosphere of their own about the waters and the walls. Well, how do you know that the moss and the fungi in the house are alive? Because it's breathing. Come again? You see that weird leaden mist that you referred to in the exposition? Yeah? That's its breath. It's alive. It's alive and it's controlling me, and it's making me go insane. The result was a discoverable, he added, yet in that silent, yet inopportune, terrible influence for which centuries had molded the destinies of his family, and which made him, what I now saw him, what he was. Such opinions need no comment, and I will make none. Our books, the books which for years had formed no small portion of the mental existence of the invalid, were, as might be supposed, in strict keeping with the character of the phantasm. Here, Edgar Allan Poe goes into a long, lengthy list of books. If you want to study Edgar Allan Poe and find out all of the meanings of these books and symbolically what they stand for, you should do that. We're not gonna, okay? Instead, I want you to move down. We're going to go 3 paragraphs down. So the first paragraph says, I could not help thinking. The second paragraph says, at the request of Usher. The third paragraph says, having deposited our mournful burden. Go to the paragraph that says, having deposited our mournful burden. deposited our mournful burden upon the trestles within the region of horror, we partially turned aside and yet unscrewed the lid of the coffin and looked upon the face of the tenant. So Roderick Usher is basically saying, listen, the house is alive, the swamp is alive, the fungi's alive, it's breathing around us, it's making me go insane, and I'm pretty sure that we buried my sister alive. I can't sleep. Please help me go check on her grave. They could not actually properly bury her because it's not time yet, so there's a vault underneath the house. Oddly enough, the vault where the dead sister is directly below the bedroom of our narrator, to which I would say, I think I need a different room. A striking similitude between the brother and the sister now first arrested my attention, and Usher, divining perhaps my thoughts, murmured out some few words which he learned the deceased himself had been twins. Edgar Allan Poe, like Stephen King, is obsessed with twins. And that sympathies of scarcely intelligible nature had always existed between them. Our glances, however, rested not long upon the dead, for we could not regard unawed. The disease which had thus entombed the lady in the maturity of her youth had left, as usual in all maladies of strictly cataleptical character, the mockery of a faint blush upon the bosom of the face, and that suspiciously lingering upon the lip, which is as terrible in death. They open up the tomb. She's been dead for a day. They open up the tomb, and her cheeks are rosy. Now, biologically speaking, you do have gathering of blood after a body is cold. It just happens. But it's not supposed to be at the top. It's supposed to be at the bottom. Okay? But they open up her coffin, and her cheeks are rosy. That was actually a condition of tuberculosis often, is what caused the blood capillaries in the cheeks to break open as people coughed. So this could be a simple, she had tuberculosis and that's what she died of, right? We replaced and screwed down the lid, and having secured the door of iron, made our way with toil into the scarcely less gloomy apartments of the upper portion of the house. And now, some days of bitter grief having elapsed, an observable change came over the features of the mental disorder of my friends. Oh God, he's going crazier. His ordinary manner had vanished. His ordinary occupations were neglected or forgotten. He roamed from chamber to chamber with hurried, unequal, objectless step. The pallor of his countenance had assumed, if possible, a more ghastly hue. But the luminousness of his eye had utterly gone out, so he's acting like a dead person. He just saw his twin / wife dead in front of him, and he's like losing his marbles, all right? And now he's acting like a zombie. The once occasional huskiness of his tone was heard no more, and a tremulous quaver, as if of extreme terror, habitually characterized his utterance. There were times, indeed, when I thought his unceasingly agitated mind was laboring with some oppressive secret to divulge, which he struggled for the necessary courage. At times, again, I was obliged to resolve all into the mere inexplicable vagaries of madness, for I beheld him gazing upon vacancy for long hours in the attitude of a profounder attention, as if listening to some imaginary sound. So if you've ever seen your dog look at the corner of the room and there's nothing there, and it stares at it for hours, that's what he's doing. He's being super creepy. It was no wonder that his condition terrified, that it infected me. I felt creeping upon me by slow yet certain degrees the wild influences of his own fantastic yet impressive superstitions. It was especially upon retiring to bed late in the night of the 7th or 8th day, after placing the Lady Madeline within the donjon, I love that spelling, the dungeon, that I experienced the full power of such feelings. Sleep came not near my couch, so our narrator is now awake and has been awake for a while. That means he is less reliable, okay? While the hours waned and waned away, I struggled to reason off the nervousness which had dominion over me. I endeavored to believe that much, if not all of what I felt, was due to the bewildering influence of the gloomy furniture of the room. Again, he's questioning himself. First person point of view. We can't trust this guy. He can't even trust himself. We don't know if this is really a haunted house with a zombie at the bottom of the stairs, or if this is just someone who keeps convincing himself that weird things are happening because his friend's losing his marbles and he's in the middle of a swamp. We don't know. That's a good horror story. Good horror story doesn't tell you here's the monster, because the minute you can name the monster, it's not your monster anymore. It's a pet. right? Stephen King says we cannot name our monsters. The moment we name our monsters, they are our pets. So in this instance, we don't know if Madeline is a zombie. We don't know if she's a vampire. We don't know if she's even really dead. All we know is that our narrator is questioning himself and everything, and he has not had a lot of sleep. He's been in this environment with this kooky guy for a while, and now he's beginning to convince himself that it's not really the bad stuff that's happening, it's just the house is weird, right? Of the dark and tattered draperies, which, tortured into motion by breath of rising tempest, swayed fitfully to and fro upon the walls, and rustled uneasily about the decorations of the bed. So, not only do we have our narrator who says he's not reliable, we're in this weird situation, we're in this house. Now, and this should tell you that we're about to come to the climax, if you're reading Shakespeare or Edgar Allan Poe, if a storm is on the rise, we're about to hit the turning point of the story. A tempest is another way of saying a storm. There is a storm on the horizon, and it's making everything in the house move. Okay? But my efforts were fruitless. An irrepressible tremor gradually pervaded my frame, so now he's shivering. And at length there sat upon my very heart an incubus of utterly causeless alarm. Shaking this off with a grasp and a struggle, I uplifted myself upon the pillows, and peering earnestly within the intense darkness of the chamber, I hearkened, I know not why, except that this instinctive spirit prompted me to certain low and indefinite sounds which came through the pauses of the storm at long intervals. I knew not whence. He's hearing noises through the intervals of the storm. An incubus is sitting on his chest. Have you guys ever heard of an incubus before? Do you know what that is? Some of you do. So when you are sleeping, have you guys ever woken up in the middle of the night, usually like around 2 a.m. to 4 a.m.? Does that ever happen to you? It will when you get older. So 2 to 4 a.m., your REM sleep cycles, you go through cycles of sleep. There's REM sleep, which is actually where you do the most dreaming at the very beginning of your sleep. Then there's deep, deep, deep sleep. Deep sleep is very little dreaming. Okay, and then you start to cycle back out. That's called a circadian rhythm. All right, all sorts of sleep studies that study it. We didn't study sleep back at this time period. In the 1800s, we didn't know sleep cycles were a thing. But the majority of people will wake up between the hours of 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. because your circadian rhythm has taken you back into the REM state of sleep. And sometimes something as simple as not catching your breath enough will pull you completely out of that sleep. And some people will have problems with what's called sleep paralysis or waking sleep, where you are awake but you cannot move. Or waking sleep, where you think that you are awake and you start to lucidly dream even though you are still dreaming. These all take place between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. because of the circadian rhythms. It's the sun that makes us feel this way. Back in the day, they didn't know why it happened, so they came up with a theory, and the theory was the theory of the incubus. The incubus is a demon or a monster that sits on your chest and stares at you until you wake up. So our narrator, who's not getting a lot of sleep, who's in the middle of a storm, who's in this crazy house with all of this weird drapery and this darkness, and his friend's gone insane, and there's a dead girl underneath his bedroom, basically wakes up in the middle of the night and feels as though something, a demon, and you guys, if you want to Google the image of the incubus, it's a pretty creepy thing, is standing on his chest, and there's a storm rising. Do you think we're in the middle of rising action? Yeah. You should probably write that down. This is a great example of all of the aspects of metaphor and setting and characterization and point of view working together should show us that this is rising action, because the turning point of the story, when Madeline Usher, either as a zombie or as a person who is mistakenly buried alive, walks through the door and falls onto her brother, and he dies of terror and she dies of whatever she dies of, we are supposed to, as the readers, ask ourselves, was our narrator insane because he was isolated and away from society, or did he witness something supernatural? It's purposeful. All of the elements come together. That's why we end with the fall of the House of Usher. And notice that I did not give you a formative for the fall of the House of Usher. That should be a major hint to you that you're going to see some assessment having to do with the fall of the House of Usher in a different way, no matter what version of the test you have. Okay? All right. Put it away. We will pick up there tomorrow. I'm going to hand you guys your lanyards. I'm going to stop recording.